Welcome back to Knowledge Resources Author Insights.
Today, we're sitting down with our own editor, Navlika Ratagee, of the new book, Improving Mental Health in the Workplace. Thank you so much for joining us, Navlika. How are you?
Very good. Thank you, Amy, for having me.
It's a pleasure. Why don't you introduce yourself and your current role?
Sure. So my name's Navlika Ratagee, as you've mentioned. I'm a clinical psychologist by profession, and then have ventured into the business world by completing my PDBA and my MBA, and currently play the role of managing director at ICAS Southern Africa.
Amazing.
So
ICAS, it's amazing. ICAS, as I understand, is a global company doing a lot of culture for organizations and a lot of consulting on culture, especially for employee wellness, if I'm correct. So congratulations on your role there as the head of Southern Africa. That's amazing. How was your experience being the editor for this book?
So I think it was an incredibly humbling experience to be in the position of consolidating so much of knowledge that is actually available out there. There's a lot of work that needs to be done when talking about mental health. I think South Africa has come a long way in terms of where we find ourselves on the topic of mental health. And the pandemic has obviously also really helped in terms of showcasing and putting mental health and well-being center stage of what people are dealing with, and certainly from a workplace perspective, what people are dealing with as well. And we're starting to see some positive shifts being made. However, there's still a lot that needs to be done to address the stigma and the discrimination relating to mental health. So when confronted with the opportunity to really put together what is it that we can do to improve mental health in the workplace, I jumped at the opportunity because I feel so passionately around the work that does need to be done. And in thinking about what would be valuable, to share with the readers out there across the board. So it wasn't targeted at, even though it's called Improving Mental Health in the Workplace, there's so much in the book that you could use on an individual level, just to improve your life personally. So even though it is really lots of tools to incorporate from a workplace perspective, there's lots of little gems around some of the practical things that you could do individually and even with your family, in communities, etc. So it's really quite flexible and versatile in terms of how the book gets used. And I think that was the intention at the end of the day as well. So even though it's split up into different parts of really unpacking the issue of mental health, what are we seeing? Why are we seeing this as an issue? Where have we come from? Where's the journey that we still need to travel around mental health? Then looking at mental health in the context of it being one component of your overall health and well-being. And that it's so closely linked to the other areas of well-being. So really looking at it from a holistic perspective, that was then the next focus area, and really understanding the relationships between mental health and physical health and well-being, mental health and your diet, movement. So all of those elements brought into it. And then the final part of it, really looking at coping mechanisms. What can we do to help ourselves, and what can we do to help those around us? And I think that's again from the focus of it being a workplace perspective. That's where workplaces are struggling, is that they know that this is an important topic to really position within an organization. But how do we go about doing that? And what does that mean? What does that actually look like? And I'm hoping that the journey that I've traveled to try and answer these questions for myself and putting these parts together of the book would help those individuals looking for those kinds of answers to walk along that journey and really just look at it as a handbook. Pick and choose the pieces that you might want to focus on at this point in time, and really then just read up on that piece in particular if that's what you need.
I do think that's something that I personally love about the book, is that it's so practical. I think it's something that's going to sit on your shelf for years and years and years. You'll reference it again and again and again. It's going to be something that sticks with managers throughout this time. What I do want to ask you, though, is I think with Instagram and Twitter and all these things, mental health has been thankfully a more trending topic, as you've mentioned. I think a lot of people are very much aware. And I think people are taking steps. A lot of companies have taken steps to improve mental health and wellness. Why do you think then it's still such a big issue? Why is there still such a global decline? Is it just the capitalism mindset? What are we doing wrong? And how can this book help us make it right?
So I think there's a number of different ways to answer your questions, because I think there's a number of contributing factors. So maybe just to touch on some of them. One is I think there's a legacy of mental health being a negative connotation, that there's something wrong with me, and that people understand mental health to mean mental illness. And I think that that's one of the purposes of this book, is really to demystify that myth that mental health is so much more than just mental illness. So I think it carries with that, these legacy issues of when people hear the term mental health, they automatically think we're talking about depression or anxiety or medication or even hospitalization. The terms mental institution, etc., come to mind. And I'm hoping that this then provides a segue into understanding that when we take care of our mental health and well-being, we're being proactive in terms of just how we cope with life on a day-to-day basis, and that we create the platform for us to thrive as individuals, and that the more we have that conversation, the more mental health people feel comfortable to talk about mental health. So I think that's the one angle to your question. Another is that I do believe that the younger generations do feel more comfortable to talk about mental health, which is another reason why I think it is taking, it's showing such prevalence on social media platforms, etc., because people are coming forward and saying, my mental health is important. What I do and don't do, and how, different things impact my mental health is important to consider. And so these conversations are coming up more frequently in terms of the impact of even environmental well-being is such a topical issue right now, so closely linked to mental health and well-being as well. People are talking about climate change and the impact that it has. So I think it's all part and parcel of what the younger generation is valuing as an important part of how we live our lives with purpose. So I'm really glad to see that this conversation forms part of how we view living our best lives, essentially.
And living optimally. I remember in our previous interview, you mentioned living optimally. And that's such an interesting way to think about it for me, because I think the way we've been living has changed entirely. It used to be work, home, everything used to be compartmentalized and separated. And now the world is entering into a new area where we really have to figure out how to live and how to live optimally. And this book, I believe, is going to be really a great help in that. A lot of what you've been saying has reminded me a lot about part 2 of the book, which is mental health is not an island. Would you care to give us a little bit of an overview you can give for the whole book, but specifically about part 2, mental health is not an island?
Yeah. So I think that was really, again, around positioning and helping people to contextualize that mental health is not something that you sort of sit down and focus on in isolation. because I think that can also feel overwhelming for people. But when you understand that it actually is one part of a bigger whole, when you are making a commitment to yourself to look after your physical well-being, just as one example, that I want to exercise more, I want to drink more water, I want to eat healthier meals and nourish my body and fuel my body so that it can do what it needs to do. All of those things are decisions that we're making to live better lives, to live healthier lives, to live in a way that we are focusing on our overall well-being. And mental health forms part and parcel of all of those kinds of decisions. So that was really the intention of that part of the book, is to really showcase that mental health doesn't exist in isolation. And often, sometimes people think, I'm dealing with this pressing deadline right now. The mental health stuff and the impact that it's having on me can wait. And that's another important consideration, especially in the times that we're living in right now. Everything that people have experienced as a result of the pandemic, loss, trauma, all of these things, we can't compartmentalize it and say we'll deal with it when we get to it, because it has an impact on every part of our lives. We can't be productive if we're struggling to deal with those difficult issues that we've been confronted with. And almost each and every one of us have been confronted with those challenges, whether directly or indirectly. So it was really an opportunity to try and position that mental health forms part and parcel of everything that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And as much as it can't be isolated, it also needs attention in terms of what are we doing on a day-to-day basis to keep ourselves in check, to maintain that balance, and how that then contributes to our overall well-being.
Is that why it was so important to you to have writers from a lot of different backgrounds, like dietitians and medical doctors? It's not just mental health practitioners in the book, but a lot of different industries.
Yeah, I think it was a great opportunity to bring in professionals from across the different helping professionals to really showcase that there's such a close integration with everything that we think about from a well-being perspective, and it's linked to mental health. We even have the financial well-being included in that particular part of the book as well, to showcase just what a close relationship there is with how we deal with our finances. So Val, who wrote that chapter in specific, doesn't have a clinical background. Her background is in finance. And so I think it really provides such richness in terms of the experience that could be shared, and for people to just extend themselves past their comfort zone, to really just try and think and reflect on the relationship between mental health and their specific area of expertise.
It's so exciting. I think it's going to be a great read. We do have a book launch on the 4th of November where our readers and audience can ask you questions about the book to or a lot of our contributors. Why do you think, or would you like to invite our audience to join that with you, and why do you think it would be a valuable opportunity for them?
So I do think, as I mentioned earlier, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done around really creating the space for mental health to become part of our daily language. The narrative that we have around mental health is an important one, and we need to proactively shape what we want that narrative to look like for ourselves as individuals. So how hard we are or how kind we are to ourselves, it starts there. How we want that narrative to look like within our family structures, and creating the space for people to talk about that comfortably. And certainly what we want that narrative to be within our organizational cultures as well. And we can all play our part in terms of how we start to shift that narrative. Imagine a world where we can talk about mental health in the same breath, in the same vein that we talk about our physical ailments, and how comfortable we are to say we've really had a bad flu, and the impact that that has on us, to be able to talk about our mental health in that way. So I invite everyone to be part of that conversation and to really think about what is it that I can do on an individual level. And if you are a leader in an organization, you've been given the power, the platform, and the influence to do even more. Around how you're setting the tone, how you're creating more awareness around mental health. I mean, this is one of the statistics we share in the book as well, that only 25% of people that need help are getting the help that they need. And so, again, that showcases the work that still needs to be done for people to learn more about how do I get help, when do I need help, why do I need help, to creating more awareness and really creating a platform where people are able to share. We create that psychological safety. We create those circles of trust. So that we are comfortable to come forward with mental health concerns. It doesn't need to be mental health diagnoses or mental illnesses as such. So I invite people to join in and really for us to create momentum to elevate the conversation.
Thank you so much, Navlika. I'm looking forward to the book launch a lot, and I really wish you all the best. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thanks, Amy. I look forward to seeing you at the book launch.